You thought you wanted to be a Roman soldier. Maybe you were 17, maybe younger. You'd watched the legions march through your town, the flash of iron armor catching the afternoon sun, the crisp, mechanical rhythm of hobnailed boots on stone. You'd heard the stories from men who'd come back, the pay, the land when it was over, the pride of serving the greatest military force the world had ever seen. And then you actually showed up to enlist, and that's where the dream started dying. Before Rome would even consider letting you bleed for her, she had to make sure you were worth the trouble. Because Rome didn't want warm bodies. Rome wanted machines, human machines, and the process of building one, deciding that you were unfit raw material, started the moment you walked through that gate and they got their first look at you. The very first thing they did was look at you. Not in the way you'd expect. A Roman recruitment officer wasn't measuring your courage or reading your soul. He was inspecting you the same way a horse trader looks at livestock. Your eyes. The width of your chest, the size of your hands, the shape of your legs. The military writer Vegetius recorded exactly what they were looking for, and he left nothing out. Lively eyes, broad, muscular chest, strong arms, a narrow waist, legs that looked like they could carry a man through hell and come out the other side. If you looked soft, you might be turned away right there. Vegetius was specific about which trades disqualified you on sight. Weavers, fishermen, pastry cooks. Anyone whose life had been spent doing what he called women's work. But smiths, wagon makers, butchers, hunters, men whose daily lives had already beaten some toughness into them. Those were the ones Rome wanted. You needed to arrive already halfway broken in. If you looked the part, a military doctor examined you. He poked and prodded every part of your body. He was looking for anything that might make you a liability on campaign. A bad joint, poor eyesight, anything that suggested you'd fall apart before the legion got what it needed from you. If you passed the doctor, you were allowed to proceed. But you still weren't in the legion, not yet. Not even close. They called it the signatio, the period of trial. For the next 4 months, you would exist in a kind of limbo. You wore military clothes. You lived in the camp, but you were separated from the real soldiers. Quartered apart from them, eating apart, sleeping apart. You were not one of them. You were something to be evaluated. And the men assigned to evaluate you had no patience, no sentiment, and absolutely no interest in your opinion of any of it. The first month was built almost entirely around one thing: marching. And if you think that sounds like a relief compared to combat training, you need to understand what Roman marching actually was before you let yourself feel any better. This wasn't walking. This wasn't even hiking. Roman marching was an endurance test that would break most men alive today, and the Romans did it every single day. The standard was 20 Roman miles, roughly 18 to 20 modern miles, completed in 5 hours, at a regulated pace, in formation, without straggling, without breaking ranks, and critically, not in gym shoes and athletic gear, in full military kit. We're talking iron or bronze armor, a large wooden and leather shield, the scutum, that alone weighed 15 to 20 pounds, a helmet, 2 javelins called the pilum, a short sword, and then the pack, the furca, a T-shaped pole they carried on their left shoulder with everything dangling off it. Cooking gear, food rations for 5 days, personal items, entrenching tools, a pickaxe or delabra, a wicker basket for moving earth, wooden stakes for building the camp at the end of the march. All of it together, strapped to your body and your pole, added up to anywhere from 60 to over 100 pounds, depending on the campaign. Now march 20 miles in 5 hours, in summer heat, on dirt roads, in sandals. Because, yes, the most powerful military force of the ancient world marched in sandals. And when the Romans wanted to push it, the quick march, 24 miles in 5 hours. Same load, same formation, just faster. And here's what nobody tells you about the marching. It wasn't just about getting somewhere. It was the first real filter in the training program. Vegetius is explicit on this. Marching skills were taught before recruits ever touched a weapon, because an army that can't march in formation is already defeated. A single man who falls out of step, who staggers, who slows down, forces everyone behind him to slow down too. The formation bunches up, the spacing breaks, and on a battlefield, a formation that's fallen apart is a formation waiting to be slaughtered. So the march wasn't just conditioning. It was the test of whether you could be part of something bigger than yourself, whether you could suppress your own physical misery and stay in line. If you fell out repeatedly, you were cut. Simple as that. The Legion had no use for men who couldn't keep pace, and if the march itself wasn't enough, there was what happened at the end of it. When the day's march was done, when your legs were shredded and your shoulders had been ground raw by the furka for 5 hours, you didn't get to rest. You didn't get to eat and collapse onto your bedroll. You had a camp to build, every single night when a Roman army stopped. Whether it was for 1 night or 100, a fortified camp had to be constructed before any man slept. This wasn't optional. This wasn't something the engineers handled while the infantry watched. Every soldier had his assignment. You dropped your pack, you pulled out your entrenching tools, and you went to work. The camp was always built to the same plan. Rectangular. 4 gates, a perimeter ditch 12 feet wide and 9 feet deep, dug by hand with a pickaxe and a wicker basket to carry out the earth. The soil piled up inside to form a rampart. On top of that, the wooden stakes every man had carried on the march were driven into the earth to form a palisade, a proper wall, and this, all of this, had to be completed in roughly 5 hours. Centurions inspected the work with measuring rods, 10 feet per man. Every section accounted for, and if your section was sloppy, if the ditch wasn't deep enough or the stakes weren't properly set, you were punished. So that was your day. March 20 miles. Build a small fortified city. Do it in sandals. Then sleep. Wake up before sunrise and do it again. Recruits did this for weeks before they ever picked up a weapon. When weapons training finally began, the Romans made sure to remove any notion that you'd earned an easier day. The training weapons, the wooden sword and the wicker shield, were designed to be twice the weight of the real thing. Twice. The wooden gladius was heavier than iron. The wicker shield was heavier than the actual combat shield. The Romans understood that if you could manage the brutal version, the real weapons would feel almost effortless by comparison. It was calculated suffering with a purpose. Your first opponent was a wooden stake, a tall post driven into the ground, usually about the height of a man. You attacked it, not from a distance. Up close, the way Roman combat actually worked, shield in, sword out, short controlled thrusts into the post's midsection. You didn't slash, you didn't hack. The Romans had studied what actually killed people in close combat, and they knew the answer. The thrust. A slashing blow might open a wound, but it leaves you exposed. A controlled thrust to the gut or throat, delivered from behind the cover of your shield. That's what ended men. So you practiced the thrust, hundreds of times, thousands of times. You stabbed that post until you couldn't feel your sword arm, until the weight of the wooden weapon had turned your shoulder into a single sustained scream, until the centurion blew the whistle and told you to start again. New recruits were expected to do weapons drill twice a day, morning and afternoon. Veterans only once. So while the experienced men around you were getting a relative break in the afternoon, you were back at the post. Javelin training followed. The pilum was Rome's signature weapon, a heavy throwing spear with a long iron shank that was designed to bend on impact so it couldn't be thrown back at you, but throwing it accurately, at distance, at a moving target, in formation, without breaking your throwing arm. That took training. Again, the practice pilum was heavier than the real thing. You threw until your shoulder felt like it was separating from your body. Then you were expected to pick up your practice gladius and do sword work. Formation training was layered on top of all of it, because the individual skills, the march, the sword, the throw, meant nothing if you couldn't execute them as part of a unit. The Romans fought in formations that required every man to know exactly where he was, where his shield needed to be, and what his body needed to do the moment a horn signal or shout changed the formation's shape. The testudo, the tortoise, where shields locked together overhead to form a shell of iron against arrows and projectiles. The three-line formation of the triplex aces, splitting apart, merging back together, wheeling left, wheeling right, all while maintaining the spacing and the tempo that separated a Roman legion from a mob. You drilled these movements until they were automatic, until your body knew the commands before your brain had finished processing the horn signal. And if you broke formation, if you stepped left when you should have stepped right and opened a gap, the centurion and his vine staff found you. The vine staff, every centurion carried one, a thick walking stick cut from a grapevine, and it was used on soldiers the way a trainer uses a whip on animals that have failed to respond to instructions. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't a tap on the shoulder. It was discipline administered immediately and without bureaucracy to the man who had screwed up and needed to understand that in battle, his mistake would kill the man next to him. During all of this, the marching, the digging, the drilling, the weapons work, they were also watching something they couldn't measure directly. Vegetius called it military courage, not just bravery in the flash of violence sense. The Romans understood something that modern armies still recognize, that raw courage in a fight is almost irrelevant if the man doesn't have the endurance to function when he's already been broken by exhaustion. They needed to know what you were made of after 4 hours of marching, after an hour of digging, after a morning of weapons drill that had already ground you down. Were you still there? Were you still present? Were you still willing? Because that's what the test was really measuring. Not whether you could run fast, not whether you could swing a sword when you were fresh, whether you could keep going when everything in your body was telling you to stop, whether you would show up the next morning and do it again without being dragged. The Romans could teach a man the march pace. They could teach him the thrust. They could teach him formation. They could not teach a man the willingness to endure. That either lived in you or it didn't. And your food reminded you of this every day. The Roman system tied rations directly to performance. Instructors who were particularly skilled, especially weapons instructors, received double rations as a formal reward from the military. Men who failed to meet the standard received reduced rations until they improved. Think about that for a moment. You've just marched 20 miles with 100 pounds on your back. You've dug a ditch. You've done weapons drill twice. And now the centurion is telling you that because your sword form was wrong, you're getting less food than everyone else tonight. Less food, more work tomorrow. Get better or eat less. And if you couldn't get better, if despite the pain and the reduced rations and the vine staff across your back, you simply couldn't make the pace, couldn't hold the form, couldn't do what a Roman soldier was required to do, you were dismissed, ejected. The legion replaced you with someone else. The army of Rome was not a place for men who almost made it. Vegetius puts it plainly. Many men who looked promising on first inspection were found completely unfit once the training began. Those men were rejected and replaced by better men, for it is not numbers, but bravery that carries the day. 4 months. That's how long it lasted before you were given a final evaluation. If you'd survived the marches, if you'd kept the pace when your legs were on fire, if you'd held your position in the formation when every instinct said scatter, if you'd kept swinging when you were running on nothing, if you'd shown, day after day, in the rain and the heat and the dark before sunrise, that you were the kind of man Rome could stake her empire on. Then they gave you the mark. The military brand, a permanent mark on your skin, tattooed or branded, that said you belonged to Rome now. You were a legionary. And the moment they put that mark on you, you became the lowest-ranking man in the most dangerous job in the world. You were officially at the bottom of an organization that regularly asked men to die for it. The training you'd just survived? That was the easy part. You hadn't seen a battlefield. You hadn't stood in a line while 15,000 men screamed and charged at you from 100 yards out. You hadn't watched the man next to you stop existing between one heartbeat and the next. You hadn't spent 3 weeks on campaign with rotting feet and a stomach that hadn't had a proper meal in 2 weeks, looking at a fortified Germanic hill fort that Rome had decided you were going to take apart with your hands. That was all still coming. What the 4 months had done was prove that when it came, you wouldn't run. You wouldn't break the line. You wouldn't be the man whose failure killed the men around him. That was Rome's standard, not for the elite, not for the officers or the veterans or the decorated centurions, for every single man who wanted to call himself a legionary. Pass or go home. Pass or eat less. Pass or get replaced by someone who could. Rome didn't coddle you. Rome didn't ask how you were feeling or adjust the standard to meet you where you were. Rome handed you a wooden sword heavier than iron, pointed at a stake, and watched what you did with it. And most men who showed up at 17, full of glory and stories, found out in that first week of marching what they were actually made of. Rome had already known the answer. It just needed you to figure it out for yourself. If this is the kind of content you want more of, the real story of what it meant to be a Roman soldier, not the glory, but the grind, do us a favor and hit that like button. And if you're not already subscribed to Legacy of Rome, now is the time. Every video we put out goes deeper into the brutal daily reality of the men who built and bled for the most powerful military machine the ancient world ever produced. Subscribe, and we'll keep making it. We'll see you in the next one.